Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to What's Cooking with Dr. Cook. I'm Dr. Allison Koch, the resident registered dietitian for foodguides.com, a place for acid reflux, sufferers of GERD and IBS, and those following the low FODMAP diet can come and get all of their health and nutrition information in one place. And I am joined by a very special guest tonight. Another Food Guides expert contributor and registered dietitian and board certified specialist in oncology nutrition, Emily Hamm. So, welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yay! Emily has written so many wonderful articles for foodguides.com, and we also went to grad school together at UNC Greensboro, so that is also wonderful too. It's always great to have another registered dietitian on the show just to talk about food stuff and sciencey stuff with. So, yay!
Yay, yeah, so exciting.
Absolutely exciting. Um, one of the things I always like to ask other RDs who come on the show is what inspired you to become a dietitian?
So it's kind of like a, I guess, common answer, but I've always been really into health. And, when I was in college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought about nursing, but then I was like, not for me. Thought about medical school, again, not for me. And then I took a nutrition course, and I just thought it was really interesting of how in depth it was, and how much we actually learned about how it impacts the human body. Um, and so I just fell in love, and the more classes I took, the more I liked it, the more I learned. And here I am today. So I currently practice in oncology nutrition, and I find it very interesting. It's a fascinating field, and nutrition impacts so much of our health and how disease develops. So I just think it's really important to help patients through their cancer journey, but also helping them on the other side and then in a preventative measure as well. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, you know what's so funny is that I essentially had the same pathway too. I was thinking about nursing and then took that intro to nutrition course and fell in love. Absolutely. And it's like, oh wow, this is like so specific and so cool. Like nutrition is like, well, I thought like this is completely specific. And then you start getting into the, academics with nutrition, you're like, there's so much more specificity to it. Like it's just insane how crazy in depth the field of nutrition is.
A lot of people think that dietitians just sit around and talk about eating fruits and vegetables, but that's not it at all. Like, you have to know so much more about the human body, how it works. And to me, it's like, wow, I actually get to learn this and then use food to help people and to teach them. And it's cool to me. I just love it. I love how the two mesh.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool that you have your, board certification too. Like you have a specialty in oncology nutrition, because those are kind of newer too. I mean, they have diabetes, they have renal nutrition, I think they have sports nutrition, and that was really cool. So you had to prepare for that. Was that practice hours and a test?
Yeah, we had to get so many practice hours. I think it's 2,000. And then you
Oh,
sit and take the exam every 5 years. But I mean,
okay.
yeah, it's a lot of it's like knowing the medication, the treatment regimen, side effects related to the treatments, um, food interactions that can happen with the treatments, all the lab values, everything. So it's kind of learning all of that and how to apply nutrition therapy to that world, which it's a lot. Like, I remember feeling very overwhelmed when I first started that job. But now I just love it. It's just so fascinating to me. And I continue to learn something new all the time. Like, even with writing for food guides, I learn new things and then come across new stuff. I'm like, oh, this can be applied here. Like, I found this article and it talks about the gut. And then, it dives, everything crosses over. So, like, a lot of people have IBS. Well, those people also can get cancer. So it's crossing over into other territories and figuring out ways to help them too. So it's just very complex, and I find a challenge and I like it. So
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that kind of leads to my other question, what do you love most about your job?
the complexity, it's
Yeah.
just so intriguing to me. Like I love feeling like I always have to learn something. Like I don't want to get bored. And I don't get bored at my current job. Like I just love to read. I love to find out new things about someone and how to help them through their treatment. All the fad diets that are out there that people try, they read on Dr. Google. And so it's really unique, like talking to individuals and seeing what they're doing and then helping them meet their goals, but within more of an appropriate way of doing it. And so I just really enjoy it. And you get close
Yeah.
to these
I mean,
people because you see them all the time.
absolutely. Yeah, that it's always great establishing relationships with the people that you work with and the people that you see.
Mhm.
And nutrition is just so individualized. That's one thing that is just so important for everybody to understand, that like, when you're reading about those fad diets, when you're reading about all those different, trends, if you will, that they're not applicable to a lot of people because nutrition is so incredibly individualized.
Mhm.
Um, and that would definitely, just out of curiosity, because we deal with it so often. But what is one of the like more common maybe myths or hot topics that you come across, maybe, with the people in your work, or just maybe even family or friends, because I know you probably get a lot of nutrition questions from other people just in your life, um, that you encounter, and how do you address it?
Well, there's a lot of those. I feel like a big one that I get a lot of times is like, is this food going to cure such and such? Like, is there a magic food? That's a common question. Doesn't matter if it's related to cancer. I've had it, and people ask me that in regards to like autoimmune disease, and it's just like food is holistic altogether. There's not one food that's better than others in regards to like fruits and vegetables and that kind of thing. Like they all offer different nutrients. They all have different levels of vitamins, minerals, and fiber they're all good for your body, but you have to have them all together. There, you can't just isolate one and make it the cure. That's not going to happen. If that was the case, then everybody would be like down in blueberries if they were the cure to cancer. So I actually get asked that quite a bit. And then I get asked a lot of questions about sugar. So that one's another topic that I don't really want to go into. But a lot of
Isn't that the
people,
truth though? Sugar, oh my
it,
goodness.
sugar
Yeah.
gets a bad rap a lot of the time. And it's like not just table sugar. I'm not talking about like sugar like in desserts, but I'm talking about carbohydrates as a total, like fruit.
Carbs, yes.
Is fruit bad for
Yeah.
me? Are carbs bad for me? And I always have to explain, no, our bodies rely on carbohydrates as their main source of energy. Our brains need a minimum of 120 grams a day to function. If you don't eat enough carbs, you might start feeling foggy, tired, fatigued, irritable. And that's just because your body's like, wait a minute, where's my energy? So, yeah, I get a lot of questions about sugar and carbs.
Yes. Yeah. And that's such a hot button for me too, because there's so many people who just really want to debate about that. But science is science, and your body does need carbohydrates. And really, when it comes to health and well-being, we want to live for a long period of time. And in order to do that, we have to consume antioxidants. Well, you don't receive antioxidants from eating meat and cheese. You receive those from whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. And, that actually will help your brain to live long.
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
and that's always like one of the, main points. I'm like, well, do you want to, have a cut body? Do you want to have that cut look when you're walking around the beach, or do you want to live for a long period of time, and engage in conversations? So yeah, there's, yeah, carbs are a hot button for sure.
Yeah, they
For
are.
sure. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I'm very excited to talk about some of the work that you have done with food guides because you have written so much on the gut microbiome. Um, I actually really enjoyed the piece that you just recently published on pelvic floor therapy for bowel incontinence too, because that was something that was new to me. But we're going to talk about the gut microbiome, tonight, and I think it would be just kind of cool for you to maybe give the audience, if they're not familiar with your work, maybe a few of the topics that you've written about that you've enjoyed the most or you found the most interesting.
Okay, for sure. The gut microbiome's recently become an interesting topic to me because I went to a meeting recently where a dietitian was presenting on precision medicine, and they were talking about the gut microbiome being the next big thing in regards to obesity, disease management, and all that kind of stuff. So it was just very fascinating to me. And I was like, well, let me dig a little more into this. Um, and so I've written several articles like explaining what the gut microbiome is, which I'll talk about here in a second, but also just other things that impact it. So, like, how is our health impacted by the gut microbiome? How does it develop? Are there things that can alter it? Certainly. So, just trying to really pull in all pieces of it and see what research has said about it, what they're currently looking at. It's a fairly new area of research. There's some studies and things they've looked at over the past 20 years, but a lot of it's really recent in what they're doing and the way that they study it's very fascinating to me. And to a lot of it, a lot of the research out there currently is just cell and animal studies. And so I'm really excited to see moving forward what researchers can do to really study it and how they can applicate it to real human subjects. So, like, over time, what are we going to learn based on what the knowledge we currently have? So I'll talk a little bit about what the gut microbiome is. So it's basically our whole GI tract is lined with bacteria, different viruses, protozoa. A lot of them are good for our body. Some of them are pathogenic, so they can cause illness or disease. In a normal, healthy individual, hopefully the good bacteria, the ones that aren't causing problems, are in higher amounts. And everybody's um, microbiome is different. Not one person probably has the exact same microbiome. So each individual, based on their lifestyle, their diet, medication use, um, genes, I'm sure your genetic makeup has a lot to do with what your microbiome looks like. So those are all factors that can influence it. Your microbiome starts at birth. So depending on how you're born, if it's by C-section or vaginally, you get different bacteria. If you're breastfed versus formula fed, you have different bacteria lining your GI tract and even on your skin. So it varies. And then diet. So most babies start with a pretty similar gut microbiome, but as they start getting introduced to food and they, are in the environment more, going outside, touching the dirt, touching trash, whatever, they all start to get different profiles. And so that's why illness too is so important. Like when kids get exposed to germs, they're just building up their immunity. They're getting different gut microbes and they're lining their GI tract. So it's kind of cool how it all works and how it all comes together. So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's really um, it's it's amazing all the different factors that you just mentioned, like in that very short synopsis that affect like the gut microbiome development. Um, but it really is kind of like a homeostasis, situation too, because when you have that imbalance of gut bacteria, if you have like an overgrowth of harmful bacteria, that's where you can have like different health issues as
Mhm.
well, which you've talked a lot about in your articles. Um, Diarrhea, constipation are two that I can think of off the top of my head. And both of those are really connected to inflammation,
Mhm.
which is which is something that is pretty prevalent, and that can happen through diet as well. So, diet plays a huge role in how the gut microbiome flourishes or flounders as well. And I would love for you to kind of speak on that too.
Yeah. So when we talk about diet and how it impacts the gut microbiome, you have prebiotic foods, which are, your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains. So those feed the gut bacteria through fermentation. So when you eat something like that, the little gut microbes are sitting there just eating it all up, and they're creating short chain fatty acids, which lead to health. They have health consequences, so good ones and bad ones. So when you eat those prebiotic foods, your body is just getting those good nutrients. It's allowing your body to have a stronger immune system because your gut microbiome is very it's influenced, it has a lot of immune cells lining it as well. So if you don't have those good healthy bacteria to keep your gut strong, to protect your body against pathogens that you may ingest, then you might have an increased risk of getting different types of GI bugs or other types of illnesses. They can go into other parts of your body and affect you. um, and then you have probiotic food sources. So yogurt, kefir, those are great ways to replenish bacteria. So, like, let's say you're on antibiotics for an illness. Those antibiotics wipe out all of your healthy gut bacteria as well as the bad gut bacteria. So it's just cleaning house. It's trying to get rid of all that. So you have to figure out ways to get the good bacteria to regrow and recolonize. So probiotics can be helpful. You can even take those in like capsule or liquid forms as well. But you can get them in foods. And then just eating those prebiotic rich foods too help to replenish those good gut bacteria.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also the influence of, the processed foods. Like you talk about that a lot in your articles about how, there's some foods that are actually causing those like negative influences on the gut microbiome too.
Hmm. Yeah, like, Western diets, high in saturated fats, high in added sugars. And that actually is not really beneficial for our guts. It's not beneficial for a lot of areas of our body, like your cholesterol, your liver. It's detrimental. It leads to disease. So that's why, as young children, and as long as you're healthy and can tolerate fruits and vegetables, having more of a plant-based diet is so important because it does promote the growth of that good gut bacteria. Your GI tract's what comes in contact first with a lot of things that come into your body, like all the food, the drinks, even medications. That is your gut is literally coming in contact with all of that first. So you have to make sure that it's strong and that you have the good gut bacteria there to help your body to figure out, okay, well, this is good. Like, I need this nutrient, or this is pathogenic. Like, it's going to cause inflammation in my body. I don't want that. So, you want to have just a strong gut to help keep the rest of your body healthy and to defend against those pathogens.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when you are actually working in oncology nutrition, it's almost a similar approach to like the antibiotics with, kind of flushes out everything that's in your gut. So you really have to be careful about what you reintroduce back into your GI tract.
Mhm. And we do talk a
Yeah.
lot about food safety, making sure we're getting everything in, the good foods, things that are safe for people to eat, well-cooked meats, vegetables and produce that looks fresh, all that kind of stuff is really important because your body's just so susceptible to really anything. And then you
Yeah.
put other medications on top of that, and that can alter it as well. So it is important. And I think there's going to be so much more that comes out with the gut microbiome that we don't know or that we don't practice right now. We're not telling everybody all the things that we currently read and research, but one day, hopefully, they'll become a guideline and we'll have more knowledge to say, oh, yeah, like you should be doing a probiotic with, this type of medicine, or this is depleting certain nutrients in your body because you don't have the good gut microbes to help your body absorb certain nutrients and vitamins and minerals. So it's very interesting to me to see how it all interacts.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is nice that you mentioned the antibiotics with the gut microbiome for sure. I know another medication that directly affects the gut microbiome is proton pump inhibitors, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's one that, especially with food guides, that we're always kind of talking about, just because it's something that can change the pH of the gut. So when you're taking, PPIs, that's changing the pH of your gut. And, what they're connecting that to is actually an overgrowth of bacteria sometimes. And, even like a higher incidence of C. diff has been reported. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see just how all of these different medications, and there's that connection, with dysbiosis, with the gut microbiome, and just how that really kind of plays into other factors that impact everything with the whole gut brain connection too. So,
Yeah.
ooh, we have a question. Of course, you can ask a question, Chris. We'll bring Chris. Chris wants to ask a question. Let's see. Oh, I think I got a little. There we go. Howdy.
Hi, good afternoon from San Francisco. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Hi.
Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for this great information today, both of you. I have a quick question. I have a friend of mine who suspects they may have IBS, and their doctor said, well, there's no test for it. So we have to try eliminations. So they said, stay off dairy for 2 weeks. Let's see what happens there, and on and on. Is that the proper approach to find out why they're having such volatile reactions in their?
Yes. So, one of the best ways to kind of figure out what's going on with IBS is something called the low FODMAP diet. And what that is an elimination of a variety of different types of like fermentable carbohydrate containing foods. One of them is actually lactose containing, and it's can be between like a 2 to 6 week elimination diet. There's usually a list of foods um, that are eliminated, but then reintroduced to see if they trigger a reaction. But yeah, that it's actually found to alleviate symptoms in almost like 60 to 80% of IBS sufferers when followed correctly.
So if after 2 weeks the problem persists, let's say after the 2 weeks of non-dairy, that means dairy is not the problem and you try to eliminate something.
Well, it should have been a list of other foods as well. So it's not just dairy as the singular carbohydrate. There should have been some other carbohydrates as well. Um, but it's interesting if the doctor just started with dairy, because usually there's you know other food groups as well that you start with the FODMAP diet. Um, and really, the elimination process, it can take between 2 to 6 weeks, depending on what the individual was eating before they started the elimination process. But then the reintroduction takes a while, because it's quite a process to reintroduce those foods. So he or she would go through like it it's like they would test a certain amount and then see if they had a reaction. They would double the amount, um, and see if they had a reaction, and then they would try, you know, essentially a full serving of what would be like a FODMAP containing amount per the diet. It's a process, and
Okay, so
if
the best thing to do is tell them to just talk to their doctor again, make sure they're doing it right, I guess.
yeah, or to look at the low FODMAP diet for IBS.
And when you say, is it FOD, FOB, or FAB? What
It's a FODMAP.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And we have several resources on foodguides.com about low FODMAP diet. for IBS, because it
Okay.
really is a great way to figure out what is triggering symptoms. Because as an IBS sufferer, both my husband and I went through that elimination diet ourselves, and we identified several triggers. It's super helpful, but really does have to be done correctly.
Okay. Fabulous. I mean, fabulous. Also,
Fabulous.
last comment. What is with commercials on television telling me what to go tell my doctor about? What is, does anybody else notice we're bombarded? Emily, do you notice that too? We're bombarded with commercials turning us into drug salesmen to go to our doctors. Anyway, thank
Oh, I'm with you there. I agree with Chris completely. Yeah, I do not suffer from many of the ailments that I'm supposed to talk to my doctor about. And one of the things that my husband had mentioned to me was just how I think he had talked to somebody else who was from a different country who was just like shocked at the amount of pharmaceutical commercials that we have here. I was like, wait, other countries don't have those? every other every other commercial?
It is very
Yeah.
interesting. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I mean, we hear from drug reps all the time. They're always coming in the office. You always hear, so and so told me about this medication. Should I take it? And I'm just like, well, why don't we try other stuff first? So it is very, I don't want to be negative, but it's pushed a lot on people, which is unfortunate
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like lifestyle and diet definitely can be a better way of managing disease if it can be attained that way. So yeah, it is kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Not to be sidetracked, but with that, when I worked at a diabetes center, the pharmaceutical reps would bring Starbucks every morning, sometimes breakfast. And then we would have a buffet style lunch from whatever restaurant the physicians wanted. And then they would bring snacks in the afternoon. And I mean, just luscious snacks. So it's like we're working in the diabetes center here, y'all. It was just a crazy amount of food and beverages never ending in there. So yeah,
Shows you where all the money's at.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I tell you, for sure. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Um, you know, again, not exactly the type of foods that would be impacting the gut microbiome in the most effective way, for sure. But um, you know, some of the research articles and some of the articles that you've written have also focused on, some very important lifestyle factors that also play into, keeping you healthy and happy. Um, could you talk a little bit about how environmental factors and lifestyle factors such as like sleep and stress kind of play into um, the overall health of the gut microbiome?
Yeah, stress and is very interesting, and I read quite a bit of articles about how our nervous system is so integrated into our gut. Um, I was sitting and thinking to myself, all the times I've been really stressed about something or anxious, my stomach normally hurts. It's like, ooh, I don't feel good, or I can't eat, or if I do eat something, I just really feel terrible. And so that was just really fascinating to me to learn so much about how it's like there's a communication connection that's going on down there. It's actually called the gut brain axis. So it's really interesting, but basically, there's neurons everywhere and they are interacting. The short chain fatty acids that our gut microbiome is creating through the fermentation process can help with reducing inflammation, because when our guts got inflammation in it, our brain's like, oh, something's going on. So that can be related to other disease besides mental health or stress, but for sure, stress plays a big role in how our gut feels and how it interacts. So it's very interesting just to think about myself and like the instances, I'm like, oh, I never really thought of that. So yeah, very innervated and influenced by what we eat and how we feel. It goes both ways. It's not just one way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And chronic stress has, just a really overall negative impact on the gut microbiome. People who are just chronically under stress, their entire microbiome is completely changed by chronic exposure to stress too, which is, something that, like, you don't see it. You don't see your gut microbiome, but if you, really think about it, like everything, your immune system's in your gut. So, people who are chronically stressed are in fact more likely to, have more incidents of illness, you know, more incidents of anxiety and, depression, because again, it's a two-way communication, your gut and your brain. So, there's just a lot going on there with the health of your gut microbiome.
Yeah, and I was also thinking too, like, when you are stressed, you tend to want to eat more foods that are higher in fat or higher in sugar, the foods that we wouldn't normally want to nourish our bodies with. So then it's not sitting there feeding our healthy gut bacteria. We're just eating food that's not really benefiting us at all. So then that further depletes the healthy gut that we have. And so then that leads to issues with inflammation and immunity as well. So it all kind of circles back around to what we eat.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I always kind of see with all of the patients I've ever worked with, when people are under extreme stress, they either go one way or the other. They either, have that decrease in appetite or that increase in appetite. And usually when it's an increase in appetite, it's not normally for foods that are more healthful. So yeah, it's like
Mhm.
the more salty and sugar, and a lot of the time that is searching for those brain chemicals that are feel good chemicals.
Mhm.
You know, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. You know, um, you know, everything that you've looked at and everything that you've researched and even your practical experience, do you have advice for people who just want to improve their overall health?
Yeah, I mean, I commend anyone who wants to make changes to make their lifestyle more healthy, their diet more healthy. I just think it's important to do something that's realistic and easy for you. You can't go from 1 to 100 like that. It takes baby steps. And so, I used to work in general outpatient counseling. So we did a lot with weight management. We worked a lot with people with hypertension, IBS, diabetes, basically anything under the sun. And one hurdle I always found with people is that they were like, oh, I can go home and I can do all of this. Or they would get so overwhelmed by the information they got, they're like, I can't do any of this. And so, what we really tried to do is focus on, okay, what are you currently doing? Where are you currently at? Let's make a realistic small step in the right direction. So, like, for instance, for somebody who wants to get more fruits and vegetables in their diet because they don't eat them right now, find one, start with one, maybe the next week add another. It sounds too simple, but sometimes that's what it needs to be. You can't just
Yes.
be like, oh, I'm going to go buy all these fruits and vegetables at the store and then expect to want to eat them. A lot of times that can be very daunting for someone. Same thing with exercise. If you're not someone who likes to do that, don't force yourself to go all out and work out 5 days a week for an hour at a time. Like, that's just not feasible or something that would probably be enjoyable for that person. So start with something more realistic, 30 minutes once a week. And then as you become used to those habits, and slowly increase them. And I think too, just having accountability, working with a dietitian, if you have options to do that in your area, that can be a great way to help meet some of your goals. And like your friend Chris, that you were talking about earlier, who's trying to figure out, what's triggering their IBS. I think it's really important that he finds a dietitian who can help figure out some of those foods, help him work on the elimination diet, because that can be really challenging and overwhelming for someone if they're not used to that or don't know how to do it, or they look at it and like, oh my gosh, there's no way. It's all these foods I have to eliminate out and then I have to add them back in. It can be a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see it all the time. People are really frustrated when they're talking about it, especially in some of the communities, Reddit, etc. Trying to figure it out on their own. Because it is anytime you get a list of foods, it's overwhelming, no matter what it is. And another thing that, I think you said that was just so important is that you don't have to go all out. You know, one piece of fruit or one vegetable, if you are not doing that, that's a win. Like, give yourself that win. I mean, that's improvement. That's progress. And celebrate yourself for doing that.
No one's perfect, and I mean, not even myself. Like, there's things it's like, "Oh, I don't do all that," and they're like, "Well, you're a dietitian. You should be eating, like, the most perfect diet ever," and it's like, "No, I'm a human." So, just, I commend anyone who wants to make efforts to their health, and it could be just a small baby step, and it's more about making the progress on the way, like, it's a journey. It's a marathon,
Yeah.
not a
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. One of the things that Alex, my husband, has always, taught me because he's, exercise science. Always do movement that you enjoy. So, never start an exercise routine that you actually wouldn't enjoy doing. Like, find something you like. So, if you like to dance, if you like walking, like, it doesn't have to be like a full blown, you know, crazy exercise routine, an hour and a half a day or something like that. It doesn't have to be that way. You should find joy in movement.
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And sleep. So I think sleep is underrated.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that that's one thing that is, not talked about enough, I think. And it helps your entire body if you're getting enough. And it really disrupts your gut microbiome if you do not get enough. And we're talking 7 to 9 hours a night if you're an adult. So,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it's so interesting how everything's affected by the gut microbiome literally touches every single piece of your health, not just diet, but your stress levels, your sleep, exercise even can impact it. So that's why all this together, like a holistic health approach, is so important and finding that balance. I feel like we live in a culture where it's just go, 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 go all the time, and you're just rushing to get to the next thing. You don't take a minute to breathe and to do something that's good for yourself, makes you feel good. So it definitely is. Sleep is one of those underrated things. I've learned that this year for sure. Having a
Yeah, with
baby.
the little one.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. How's that going though? Are you getting enough?
it's good. I'm getting enough sleep now, so we're all good. My gut's happy.
Great. Yeah, I think for me it would have to be working on like the stress management a little bit better. So, yeah, that's going to be the key for the next year for sure. Oh, we have a speaker request. Hey.
Hello. Hi, Emily. I really have enjoyed. That brought to mind a question I've had, and it is kind of related, obviously, to the gut microbiome and specifically how you can best address that with providers. To give you the specific story, a few years ago, we traveled to Punta Cana, wonderful vacation, but I came back with bacterial infection in my gut. And I was treated for that, and they gave me an antibiotic for a week, and it was fantastic actually. Because after that, I've been a lifelong sufferer, pretty much, of IBSD. But the week after I had that antibiotic, maybe it was 2 weeks, but I felt like I'd been cured. It felt amazing. I never have felt that sense of sort of calm in that area before in my life. Even I'm on prescription medication, Viberzi, to treat my IBSD, and that manages it pretty well. And I'm overall pretty happy. But man, the antibiotic made a huge difference. I talked to my provider about it afterwards, and essentially there was He really couldn't say much. I mean, I've had that conversation with doctors before. They're like, we could test that, but that would be a lot, and we really don't know what to do. So, is there any advice you could give on how I could actually get, that feeling back, if that's even possible?
So that's actually interesting that you made a comment about that because I recently had kind of a similar discussion with one of my providers, a gastroenterologist. I was talking to her about stool studies and testing for bacterial overgrowth, parasites, etc. You name it, basically everything under the sun. And she was saying that testing is very subjective. So you have to have multiple tests sometimes to pick up certain things, like the common bacteria that they'll check for, like C. diff or I'm trying to think of some other, like H. pylori is another one they'll test for. Usually those tests will come back positive if you actually truly have that bacteria. But there's so many other bacteria species out there that they're not really sure about. They don't even know them all. So that's part of the problem too. I think some of this undiagnosed diarrhea issues or GI issues could be related to things that they just don't quite understand yet. And specifically talking about parasites, when you go out of the country, if you drink water that's not been purified or filtered correctly, you could pick up something funky. And testing may not necessarily pick that up the first go around with stool studies. So, doing multiple of those, having multiple samples, you're more likely to get something. Now, whether a provider will do that or not is a different story because not all of them think the same. They'll write it off like, oh, it's nothing. Or, they just don't want to spend the money. And sometimes insurances don't even cover for that kind of thing. So that's the other issue that you run into is insurance and what will they cover. So I think I don't know if that answers your question in full, but that's literally the roadblock I've hit when approaching it. But then I have other providers, they'll freely say, oh, you're taking this antibiotic. We got to take a probiotic to replenish. And that's common practice for them. So I think it just depends on what they're looking at, what they're looking for. And really just who you're talking to. So like if they're even interested in it, sometimes, they'll just write off if they're not interested in talking about it or they don't hold much, it doesn't hold much weight to them. So it's
Yeah,
very
that's
interesting.
kind of what I gathered because actually hearing you speak on it, my guess might be that since they don't feel exactly confident in what route they should take for treatment, they kind of want to sweep it under the rug, and that's probably what I'm up against. So, but anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing your thoughts on it.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you. But I guess just talking to your physicians too more about it. So, bringing it up every time, showing them different articles, or if you look at research studies, bringing those with you and saying, "Hey, did you see this or did you hear about this?" Sometimes that piques their interest, and then they might be more apt to look into it if you just continue to go at it with them.
Well,
So that may
thank
be
you.
helpful.
Persistence is key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that does bring up something though. And even with Chris's friend, who I think would probably feel the way that a lot of us who have suffered with IBS feel when you go to providers and you either have a lot of testing or you don't have a lot of testing, but you do receive the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. It can be extremely frustrating because there's no etiology to irritable bowel syndrome. So it makes it kind of, you know, I just want to say it is frustrating when you get the diagnosis because you can't pinpoint an exact why did this happen, where is this coming from. There are a lot of different theories and conditions that can potentially kind of you know lead to it, so to speak, like post-infectious IBS, which could be something that can happen from contaminated water, parasites, etc. um, but nonetheless, it is frustrating for a lot of people with IBS who get diagnosed because it's kind of like, okay, I have IBS, but how do I manage this? Because it's not an exact protocol. But the cool thing is that, you know, we do have the low FODMAP diet, which is helpful with a lot of people. We do have all of this research on the gut microbiome, which will hopefully be extremely helpful too. I mean, they're doing a lot with the uh, fecal transplants too,
Mm-hmm.
which is exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
interesting what they're looking at
yeah,
and like how that could potentially be a treatment to help with IBS or to even just change your gut microbiome, you know? Could help with a lot of other
yes,
disease like autoimmune, all that stuff. It's so intriguing.
yes. It is. Yeah, absolutely. The you know, diarrhea, treating C. diff, like, you know, that's been successful. And then they're even looking at it for, you know, obesity treatment and other metabolic disorders as well as psychiatric disorders. I mean, there's so much they're doing with, you know, fecal transplants now. It's very interesting.
It is.
There's so much.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
people are really going to jump on board with wanting to get somebody else's poop. Like, you know, that's kind of what you're thinking. But if
Yeah.
it helps, it helps. Like, it's so interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, we're getting off a little topic here, but honestly, it's similar. But apparently, it's been going on for a really long time. I didn't know they used it to treat like dysentery in like World War II and like soldiers, apparently. So that's part of the history of fecal transplants. Mhm.
Interesting. You don't hear about
Yeah,
that stuff in school. They don't teach you.
right. I know. Jeez. I feel like they should have taught us that. I would have
Yeah.
been like, wow, you know?
Give us some insight. You know, let us know.
Yeah, definitely. We'll write about that. So,
We should. Another topic to add to the
yeah,
list.
another topic. Definitely. Well, do we have any more questions for our wonderful guest tonight? Any questions or comments? This has been super fun, very informative. Okay. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And feel free to go check out articles that we wrote about the gut microbiome on the website. I mean, there's different ones ranging from childhood disease development, like we talked about stress. I think a few other contributors have also written on the gut microbiome too, because I've read some of their stuff and it's like, this is really cool just seeing how it all crosses over and it really does impact reflux and IBS. So, there'll be more to come out, hopefully. So just stay tuned.
Yes, yeah. And one of the really cool articles that you wrote recently was the Shime technology.
Yeah.
So it's this artificial simulator of the gut microbiome that people use to research, you know, all sorts of stuff with the gut microbiome. It's very fascinating.
That one was cool because it's taking the best of both worlds. Like they can actually use fecal samples from human test subjects, put it in this like simulator machine, and then run their research clinical trial or whatever they're doing. It's not like ideal because again it's not a human being, so we're not seeing what actually is happening in the body, but it's a controlled environment and they can simulate it to be just like the human GI tract. So I think it's really cool. I
Yeah.
really loved writing that article. I was kind of geeking out as I was reading different studies on how they use it and just like how it's built. I don't know. I thought it was so fun. So
Yeah, it was super cool. And you have some great tips on nausea, controlling nausea as well. Lots of great stuff. So if you go to foodguides.com and actually click on contributors, you can go directly to Emily's articles as well. So yeah, give her, check her out. Definitely. And thanks again. And we hope to see you all again soon. We're going to do a show next week on pre workouts. So that'll be fun. Do they work? Are they safe? What are they? So
interesting.
wonderful. Yeah. Well, have a great night, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.